My name is Linda, and I'm a 37-year-old stay-at-home mom. I've been married to Brian for 8 years. After struggling to conceive, we went through 4 years of fertility treatments. Finally, our dream came true, and to our surprise, it was twins. I was so overwhelmed with joy that I cried in front of the doctor. When we shared the news of the twin pregnancy, Brian was over the moon. My parents were obviously thrilled as well. The in-laws were simply surprised. Oh my, not only George, but Brian too. I wonder if twins run in our family, exclaimed Susan. Indeed, that's the case. Coincidentally, Brian's brother George's kids are also twins. Unlike us, George and his wife had kids right after they got married. Their twin boys, now 4 years old, are quite the handful. Having twins is intimidating, so it's comforting to have someone to talk to who understands. As the due date approaches, I struggle daily with my growing belly. Managing a twin pregnancy is no small feat. It's a relief that they've grown this much without any major issues. Thinking about things like these, the twins are already being so good to us even before being born. I somehow managed to get the housework done. What is this? It tastes like nothing. I try hard with the chores, but all I get from my husband are complaints. I'm sorry, I felt too sick to taste the food. What's that supposed to mean? You should be done with morning sickness and into your stable period by now. Stop moping around. There's no stable period in a twin pregnancy. Stop making excuses. You're a stay-at-home mom. You should at least be able to cook properly. And what about this messy room? My husband is angry all the time. He constantly complains and doesn't help at all. He won't even take out the trash. On top of a husband who doesn't care for his pregnant wife, I have another source of stress. What's with all this mess? Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you can slack off. I'm sorry, I've been feeling really sick since this morning. Really now? Are you even going to manage giving birth properly? Remember, having the baby isn't the end, it's just the beginning. Yes, I understand. Then hurry up and make my lunch. My daily visits from Susan are my greatest source of stress. She lives just a 10-minute bike ride away. She comes by around noon every day to complain and make me prepare her lunch. Then she spends the rest of her visit throwing out more insulting remarks before she finally leaves. Does she ever bother about what her husband needs? The daily aggression from Susan has reached a breaking point. I brought it up with my husband. Look, the due date is getting close, and I'm thinking of going back to my parents' place. What? You're going to be admitted to the hospital before the due date anyway. You might as well stay here until the last minute. The birth is planned to be a C-section, so I'm supposed to be admitted just before the due date. That's true, but we never know when I might start feeling labor pains. And honestly, it's been really hard having your mom come over every day. What's that all about? I explained to my husband how I've been suffering from his mother's daily visits. He knew she came by every day, but probably didn't realize she stayed so long. He looked a bit surprised. Well, I think it's a bit selfish, but isn't that just because she feels comfortable with you? What? She's leaning on you. She probably thinks of you like her own daughter. Can't you be a little nicer? Well, before my belly got this big, it was manageable, but now it's just too much. Don't you care at all about this? I pointed to my enlarged belly, and he just shrugged his shoulders. Well, I guess it's hard to move around with such a big belly. Walking is hard enough with this belly, yet your mom comes every day, complains nonstop, doesn't help at all, and makes me do all the work. If this continues, something irreversible might happen. Are you okay with something happening to our children? I definitely don't want that. Then please talk to your mom. If you keep neglecting me like this, I have my own thoughts on what to do next. As we talked, I got emotional and let out all of my thoughts. My husband looked shocked. What do you mean by that? Are you talking about divorce? If it continues like this, yes. I really can't take it anymore if Susan continues to cause me trouble, and if my husband remains on Susan's side. My husband noticed the seriousness in my eyes and sighed deeply. "All right." "Really?" "Yeah, don't you believe me?" "It's not that, but honestly, I'm skeptical. It seems like he values his mother more than me." "Then let's do this. I'll prepare a filled-out divorce form. If you ever feel like you can't trust me, just submit it whenever you want. Does that make you feel more secure?" Yes, I felt somewhat reassured seeing his commitment. After that, he really did prepare a divorce form and seemed to have spoken to his mother. I didn't end up going back to my parents' home, but from that day until I was admitted to the hospital, there were no more aggressions from Susan. I then had a C-section and safely gave birth to our twins. For a while, I stayed at my parents' home, managing the hectic early days of childcare. But the learning curve for childcare, especially as a new mother, was steep. One day my husband came to visit my parents' home. "Isn't it time for you to come back home?" "What? It hasn't even been a month yet." "It's already been a month. You've been neglecting our home too much. You're just playing around." "Playing around? I don't have any free time. Twin childcare is hard, and since I gave birth at an old age, the recovery has been slow and painful. But I'm enduring it and taking care of the kids. How does being older matter? Many people don't go back to their parents' home. Stop being so spoiled and just come back home." He left with those harsh words. Didn't he come to see his children? My husband left after saying just that without really looking at or holding our children. As I soothed the crying twins, sadness overwhelmed me, and I couldn't help but cry along with them. Not wanting to complicate our marriage, I ignored my parents' pleas to stay and returned home. "You're finally back. Do you even understand what it means to be a wife?" That was the greeting from Susan as I opened the door. She was standing like a statue, waiting for my return. Exhausted, I couldn't even muster the energy to respond and just passed by her in silence. Hey, at least respond when spoken to. I ignored her and went straight into the house. I was speechless. This isn't my home. The mess was horrible, and I muttered that to myself. The kitchen was piled high with used dishes, leaving no space for cooking. The floor was covered with used clothes and empty takeout containers. All this after being away for just about a month. Susan, did you come here while I was away?" "I came over often. I was worried about my son struggling alone." "You came over often and left it like this, worried about your son while leaving this mess. This environment could definitely harm someone's health, and it's not safe for babies. As someone who's raised children, don't you know that? For now, I will put the twins to sleep in the somewhat better baby playpen in the bedroom. Then I started cleaning." Phew, I guess that's it for now. Just as I finally got a break from cleaning, the twins cried out loud. There's no rest even for a moment. By the time I finished cleaning, the day was already turning to dusk. "Finally done? You're so slow." That's what Susan said as she sat sipping coffee. I had to suppress the urge to dump that coffee over her head. As I frowned while feeding the twins, she put down her coffee and said, "Oh, by the way, starting this weekend, George's twins will be coming over. It'll be your responsibility to look after them." "Excuse me." I was so shocked I had to pause before responding. After all, I couldn't understand what was said. "What did you just say?" "Like I said, George, our second son, his twins, we've decided to take care of them over the weekends." "What does that mean?" "We've decided to give George and his wife a break. You're just dealing with sleeping twins, so it should be easy for you to help out George and his wife." "I don't understand." I was dumbfounded. I'm not having an easy time at all. I'm so busy I barely even have time to sleep. Even when I was at my parents' house, I could hardly sleep. Returning home likely means it'll get even harder. What is she talking about?" "What do you mean, busy? I'm giving you a job. Since you're just a stay-at-home mom, you should be grateful." "That's impossible." "It's only impossible because you're inefficient. Don't blame your incompetence on others. Just so you know, this is already decided. With that, Susan left. Just like my husband, Susan spoke her mind and left without listening to my side. It's not the time to be impressed by the family resemblance. In a rush, I called my husband, who was supposed to still be at work. What? I'm busy right now. Listen, your mother is saying something outrageous. She wants us to take care of George's twins on the weekends. Oh, that. Yeah, you knew about this. I couldn't believe my husband was aware of this plan. Why didn't you say no? Well, George's family seems to be having a tough time. The twins are a handful. They can't even go out to eat, and they hardly get any rest or time to themselves. Isn't that sad? It might be sad, but how does that become our responsibility? Why can't your parents take care of them? My dad and mom are old. It's too much for them. Are you really going to push that on the elderly? You're cold-hearted. What about me? I'm already overwhelmed with our twins. Babies just sleep, drink milk, and sleep again. That should be easy, right? Oh, and don't slack on the housework. I won't tolerate any laziness. That's the deal. If you refuse, then it's divorce. How can you say that? Won't you help at all? Me? No way. You expect me to work on my days off after I'm already tired from work. You really are a terrible wife. This is hopeless. The conversation isn't going anywhere, I thought. My husband and his mother are the worst. I hung up the phone without another word. Despite the unreasonable conversation, my mind was surprisingly clear. I made another call to someone else. A few minutes later, after ending the call, I gazed at my sleeping twins. Their adorable sleeping faces gave me courage. My husband and Susan are always imposing their own needs over these adorable children, I thought. They don't have an ounce of consideration for me. To them, whether I exist or not seems to make no difference. I decided to cut off my husband and Susan swiftly and decisively. That night my phone rang. It was from my husband. Hello, I just got home. Why aren't you here? Where are you? I'm at my parents' house. What? You just came back home. Why are you still at your parents' house? I did go home and cleaned up everything. It's nice and clean now, isn't it? I called you, didn't I? Why are you at your parents' house now? Because I'm tired of you, I replied, hanging up and turning off my phone. I thought he might call my parents' house, but perhaps because it would be awkward, he didn't call. Instead, early the next morning, my husband showed up. Hey, Linda, you're there, right? What do you think you're doing? To my surprise, he brought his mother with him. The inseparable mother and son duo had arrived. Can you not make such a commotion this early in the morning? I responded with a displeased face. They both pressed on. What do you mean by this? Get back home now. That's right. Come back and take care of the house. What about my meals? They continued aggressively. I thought about telling them to go eat the grass in the yard, but it's not the right time to retaliate yet. I looked at them coldly and said firmly, my home is here. I'm not going back to your house. What did you say? Are you saying you want a divorce? Yes, I filed for divorce last night. You said it yourself, didn't you? Submit it whenever you think it's necessary. You even repeated that yesterday. That was just a figure of speech. Who would actually take that seriously? Well, I did. My husband was speechless. Linda, you must be out of your mind because of a postpartum crisis or something. Re-register your marriage and come back. If you fulfill your duties properly, I'll forgive you. His mother tried to persuade me in his place. You want me to come back and take care of your needs, and on weekends, take care of George's twins, right? I asked to clarify her intentions. Of course. I refuse. What did you say? First of all, has anyone ever told George about this plan for me to look after his kids? What? George doesn't know that I'm supposed to be taking care of his children, does he? At that, Susan's face went pale. That's right. It turns out the idea that I would take care of George's twins was something Susan had decided on her own. In fact, after my conversation with my husband last night, I called George. When I explained the situation, he was very surprised. "You're already busy with your own twins, right? I have no intention of burdening you with our kids. Sure, it's tough taking care of our twins, but they are incredibly dear to us. If we left them with someone else on weekends, we couldn't spend that time together with our twins." So it was all just Susan assuming, based on a casual remark from George, that taking care of twins was difficult. Then she decided to take care of the twins on her own, and then she tried to push that job onto me. An utterly confusing way of thinking. The divorce is already proceeding. Can you please leave now? That's unacceptable, my husband persisted. Enough already. Suddenly, a serious voice came from behind me. I turned around to see my father standing there. "What?" He looked flustered. "You've been saying some very selfish things. Have you ever helped with the housework? Have you ever taken care of the twins, even a little?" My husband struggled to find words. "I'm tired from work." "Oh, yet I hear you don't really work that hard. Mostly, you're taking breaks. And although everyone else works overtime, I hear you leave on time, yet you come home late. Are you having an affair?" "No, I was just hanging out." "Oh, you leave all the housework and child care to my daughter and go out to play. Quite the life you're living." "Oh, well, in fact, my husband was employed at the company my father ran. It was a medium-sized business with a decent number of employees. In that workplace, my husband had been arrogantly walking around and slacking off because he was the son-in-law of the owner. This fact came out when my father conducted an internal investigation. I thought he was working hard late into the night, but that was not the case. You've exhibited too many problematic behaviors, so I'm going to have to ask you to leave the company. There's no reason to keep employing a stranger now that you've divorced my daughter." "What? That can't be." "Once you understand, please leave. You will be formally notified in writing tomorrow. Make sure to pack up your belongings from the office as soon as possible." "What?" At my father's declaration, my husband, now ex-husband, turned pale. As my father turned his back on him and I was about to re-enter the house, my ex-husband took an unexpected action. He suddenly pushed past me, trying to enter the house. "What are you doing?" He was trying to reject my father's attempts to stop him. "Move. If I take the kids, you'll have to come back with me." He was yelling something meaningless. "Don't be ridiculous. Are you trying to use your own children as hostages?" "Shut up. It's your fault for not coming back." He was desperately trying to force his way into the house. I clung to him, trying to stop him. Susan was trying to pull me away with all her might. My father was hurrying to block the front door from the inside. It had turned into an unbelievable commotion. If he took the children now, it would lead to the worst possible future for everyone involved. I cried out as loud as I could, "Stop." Just then, I thought I heard the sound of a police car's siren approaching. It stopped suddenly in front of the house with a sharp sound. "The police are here, Mom." It was my mother, who had slipped past my father and rushed out. She ran up to the police officers who had just gotten out of the car and seemed to be explaining the situation. "And then why the hell? I'm her husband. I'm family. What's the problem with entering my wife's parents' house? I am this boy's mother. Why are the police involved? All right, let's continue this conversation at the station." My ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law resisted fiercely, but it looked like they were going to be taken away for questioning. My mother, who had been watching our interaction from inside the house, had sensed the threatening situation and called the police. "Thank you, Mom. I had a bad feeling and called them, but I never imagined he would try to take the twins. What terrible people, to try to make me change my mind by taking hostages. That's the worst." After explaining everything to the police, we shared a wry smile. Later, Brian and Susan were released, but they were strictly prohibited from approaching me. After negotiations through lawyers, I managed to receive a lump sum for asset division and child support. Having lost his job at my father's company and all his money, my ex-husband ended up living a meager life in a shabby apartment, doing odd jobs. I knew this because he kept sending messages to my phone repeatedly, pleading and making excuses. I was wrong. I love you and the kids. What have I done? I've changed. Can we start over? And if you just do the cleaning and laundry, I can forgive you. I can accept you. I'll be waiting. Despite his apologies, he ended up saying, I can forgive you, which is completely illogical. Of course I didn't respond. I got fed up, so I eventually blocked him. I heard from George, my ex-brother-in-law, that Susan ended up moving into that shabby apartment with Brian. It turns out she had been divorced by her husband quite some time ago, so that's why she was coming to our place so often. The mother-in-law, who was always complaining to me, was actually incompetent at household chores herself. It seems that living together, Brian and Susan are constantly arguing. Sorry for the trouble my mother and brother caused. George apologized over the phone. George must have inherited the decent qualities of his father. Raising twins must be tough. Please feel free to reach out to me and my wife anytime. His supportive words were very comforting. After hanging up the phone, the sound of the twins crying echoed through the house. All right, I'm coming. Watching the twins grow, I felt nothing